If you look at what just happened in the global economy, it doesn't look like trade diversification. It doesn't even look like a strategic pivot. It looks like a divorce. For 70 years, Canada shipped 75% of its exports south. It was automatic, it was comfortable, it was America first by default. But as of this morning, default is dead. Donald Trump tried to force Canada into submission. He thought he was dealing with the old Canada, the compliant neighbor that always bends the knee, the partner that always caves when Washington snaps its fingers. He was wrong. Mark Carney didn't negotiate. He didn't plead for mercy. He didn't send diplomats to Mar-a-Lago to beg for forgiveness. Instead, he did something that no Canadian leader has done in modern history. He turned his back on the American market. And the consequences of that one decision are already reshaping global supply chains, commodity flows, and probably the value of the dollar in your wallet. Trump is livid. Wall Street is panicking. And the mainstream media is completely missing what just happened. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what Carney signed, who's winning this chess match, and why the economic relationship you thought was permanent just got blown to pieces. So let's cut through the spin. Here is exactly what went down in the last 72 hours. It started, as these things always do, with arrogance. President Trump, frustrated by Canada's refusal to cave on his tariff demands, decided he was done playing games. He went on Truth Social at 5 a.m. and announced a new ultimatum. He demanded that Canada accept permanent 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum, dismantle supply management entirely, and give U.S. corporations unrestricted access to Canadian critical minerals. If Ottawa didn't comply within 48 hours, he threatened total trade sanctions and border restrictions. Now, usually this is the part where Canadian officials panic. They send negotiators. They issue carefully worded statements about dialogue and partnership. They try to buy time. That didn't happen. Instead, Prime Minister Mark Carney stepped in front of cameras in Ottawa. He didn't look concerned. He didn't look desperate. He looked like a man who had a plan locked and loaded. He looked directly into the lens and said simply, "We're moving on." He didn't offer compromises. He didn't ask for extensions. He announced Canada was done waiting, and then he dropped the bomb. He revealed that Canada had just finalized a $120 billion trade framework with the European Union, the United Kingdom, Japan, and South Korea, systematically redirecting exports that used to flow to America. The internet exploded. Trump fired back with a barrage of posts calling Carney a traitor and a Chinese puppet. But while Trump was raging online, something extraordinary happened in the markets. Canadian export stocks surged. U.S. manufacturing indices collapsed. For the first time in generations, a U.S. president threatened economic war, and the target didn't just survive. They thrived. You need to understand how seismic this is. This isn't just shifting trade partners. This is the complete dismantling of North American economic integration. Trump is used to dominance. He's used to countries begging for access to American consumers. But yesterday, he discovered that leverage only works if the other side needs you more than you need them. And Mark Carney just proved Canada doesn't need America. I know that sounds extreme. I know it sounds like clickbait, but I'm going to walk you through the evidence because when you see the deals, you realize this isn't political theater. It's economic revolution, and the revolution is leaving America behind. Let's look at evidence number one, the EU energy agreement. Within hours of Trump's ultimatum, Carney was in Brussels signing an expanded, comprehensive economic and trade agreement. The centerpiece: Canada will redirect 40% of its liquefied natural gas exports to Europe over the next 3 years. That's energy that used to be earmarked for American markets. Germany alone committed to a $35 billion 10-year purchasing agreement. Why does this matter? Because Europe has been desperate to replace Russian energy since 2022. They've been paying premium prices for stable supply. Canada just became their solution. And the revenue, it's actually higher per unit than what Canada was getting from U.S. buyers. Carney didn't just find a replacement customer, he found a better one. We're seeing reports from Alberta's energy sector that companies are already retooling export terminals to redirect shipments eastward across the Atlantic instead of south. They're not worried about Trump's threats. They're calculating higher profit margins. You can't threaten someone who just got a raise. Evidence number two, the Asia-Pacific Mineral Pact. This is the one that should terrify Washington. Most Americans don't realize Canada controls massive deposits of critical minerals: lithium, cobalt, rare earths, the stuff you need for batteries, semiconductors, and military hardware. The U.S. military-industrial complex has relied on Canadian supply for decades. Carney just signed agreements with Japan, South Korea, and even India to create a non-U.S. supply chain for these materials. $45 billion in guaranteed purchases over 5 years. When Carney mentioned economic independence, he wasn't talking about lumber. He was talking about the minerals that power the future economy. He was talking about the resources that American factories assumed would always be available. If Canada redirects even 30% of critical mineral exports away from the U.S., American tech manufacturers don't just face higher costs. They face supply shortages that could cripple production. Just the announcement caused rare earth futures to spike and U.S. tech stocks to tumble yesterday afternoon. That's the market telling you Carney isn't bluffing. Evidence number 3, the British Commonwealth coordination. Trump loves to mock Carney as a globalist. And yes, Carney is deeply embedded in international financial networks. He ran the Bank of England. He has direct lines to every major finance ministry on the planet. But here's why that matters right now. While Trump was tweeting insults, Carney was orchestrating a coordinated response across the Commonwealth. We're seeing leaked documents of a joint economic statement being prepared by Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand regarding protection of democratic trade partnerships. Do you see what's happening? Trump is throwing punches at one opponent. Carney is building a coalition to absorb the impact and punch back together. He's using his credibility to create an alternative trading bloc that deliberately excludes American leverage. And it's working. The Dow Jones dropped 520 points yesterday. The TSX in Toronto, it actually gained ground. That's the evidence that matters most. Global capital is betting on Carney's network, not Trump's threats. So why is this happening? Why is the most powerful economy on earth watching its closest trading partner walk away? It's because Trump miscalculated catastrophically, and he's trapped by his own aggression. We've seen this pattern before. In 2018, it was bold. In 2005, it's just repetitive. But now it's transparent. Trump's entire approach depends on economic intimidation. He threatens massive consequences. He demands immediate surrender. And he expects the target to panic and accept whatever terms he offers. He needs the win to feed the narrative. But what happens when the target has options? He has no contingency. When Carney said we're moving on, he didn't just reject Trump's demands. He revealed Trump's fundamental weakness. And now Trump is forced to watch his bluff get called. Here's the trap. If he follows through with sanctions, he doesn't hurt Canada anymore. He hurts American importers who need Canadian resources. Energy prices spike, manufacturing costs explode, supply chains that depend on seamless North American integration collapse. The very industries he promised to protect, the manufacturers in Wisconsin and the refineries in Texas, are the first ones who suffer when Canadian supply disappears. He knows this. His economic team knows this. We're hearing frantic leaks from inside the administration that Treasury officials are in emergency meetings with the National Security Council. They're saying you cannot do this. You will trigger stagflation in critical swing states before the election. But Trump painted himself into a corner. His entire brand is strength. If he backs down now, after Carney publicly dismissed him, he looks impotent. He looks like he got outplayed by a technocrat from Ottawa. So he does what he always does. He escalates the rhetoric. He calls Carney a WEF plant. He threatens to weaponize border security. He threatens to ban Canadian airlines. It's theater. It's the desperate flailing of a leader who realized his weapon doesn't work anymore. He's creating chaos because admitting failure isn't an option. You're watching someone who treats international economics like a hostile takeover. In business, you can walk away and find another deal. In geopolitics, you can't manufacture another geography. Canada shares your longest border. The infrastructure is integrated. Trump is fighting economic physics, and the harder he pushes, the more isolated America becomes. Look at the response from the U.S. Business Roundtable. They didn't release a statement backing the president. They released a warning about devastating consequences for American competitiveness. Look at the response from Republican senators in northern states. They're silent. They're horrified. They know their constituents depend on Canadian trade. Trump is standing alone on this hill. He chose it himself, and the ground is eroding. Now let's talk about Mark Carney, because if you haven't been following his career, you might think he's just another progressive leader. You might think he's just ideologically anti-Trump. You would be missing the point. Mark Carney isn't an ideologue. He's a strategist. He's a former central banker. He's a crisis architect. He navigated the 2008 financial collapse for Canada without a single bank failure. He knows how to see disaster coming and position for it. When Trump blusters, Carney builds. Notice his demeanor in that announcement. He didn't grandstand. He didn't attack Trump personally. He wore a Navy suit. He cited specific trade numbers, and he presented signed agreements. He's positioning Canada as the reliable partner. And in the current global climate, that's an incredibly valuable position. The world is exhausted by volatility. Europe is exhausted. Asia is exhausted. Investors are desperate for predictability. Carney is offering predictability. He's telling the world Canada is the stable alternative. We honor contracts. We build partnerships. We're the safe bet. In doing this, he transforms Trump's aggression into Canada's competitive advantage. Every time Trump threatens a tariff, Carney looks more reasonable by contrast. Every time Trump disrupts a supply chain, Carney positions Canada as the solution provider. This is strategic asymmetry. Canada cannot outspend the United States. The U.S. economy is 10 times larger. The U.S. military is incomparably more powerful. But Carney understands he doesn't need to win a direct confrontation. He just needs to make Trump's tactics counterproductive. He's using what strategists call targeted redirection. He's not attacking the U.S. economy broadly. He's redirecting the specific exports and resources that American industries assumed would always flow south. He's not building walls. He's building bridges to everywhere else. And here's what Carney understands that Trump doesn't: patience. Trump operates on news cycles. He needs wins daily. He needs victories to tweet about tonight. Carney is executing a 5-year plan. He knows that if he presents credible alternatives, global markets will adapt and American leverage will evaporate. It's strategic endurance. One player is screaming for immediate results. The other player is building infrastructure that doesn't need America. Who do you think controls the future? So why should you care? Maybe you're watching this in Arizona or Pennsylvania or California. Maybe you're watching this in Australia. You might think, this is just politicians posturing. It doesn't touch my life. You're wrong. This restructures the price of everything in the North American economy. The continental supply chain was engineered over 3 decades to function as one integrated system. We don't produce regionally anymore. We produce continentally. If Carney successfully redirects Canadian exports, that system fractures. If you're planning to buy anything with a battery, expect prices to jump as manufacturers scramble for alternative mineral sources. If you depend on affordable energy, watch prices climb as Canadian supply flows to higher-paying markets overseas. If you work in cross-border logistics, prepare for layoffs. But beyond immediate economics, there's a structural shift happening. We're watching the dissolution of automatic American centrality. For 80 years, when Washington demanded something, allied capitals complied without question. That assumption died this week. Canada, the most integrated ally, the neighbor that shares a culture, just walked away. And if Canada can successfully decouple, who else starts exploring alternatives? Does Australia reconsider its military commitments? Does Mexico diversify its exports? Does the EU accelerate strategic autonomy? We're watching the fragmentation of American-led global order in real time. And it's not because of Beijing's pressure. It's not because of Moscow's manipulation. It's because Washington chose coercion over partnership. This signals a world where America is optional, a world where allies have alternatives, a world where trade routes don't automatically run through American ports. Carney isn't just protecting Canadian sovereignty. He's proving that sovereignty is economically viable. He's demonstrating that you can prosper without Washington's approval. So where does this go from here? This is the critical part, because usually in these standoffs, there's a quiet resolution. Diplomats meet privately, they craft ambiguous language, and both sides declare victory. But Trump doesn't do private resolutions when he's been publicly defied. And Carney can't reverse course after signing $120 billion in agreements. We're looking at 3 possible paths forward. Path A, the new normal. Trump's tariffs take effect, Canada's trade shifts accelerate. North American integration slowly unwinds over 18 months. American consumers pay more, Canadian industries adapt to new markets, and the continental economy permanently bifurcates. This is painful but manageable. Path B, the meltdown. Trump goes nuclear. He implements comprehensive sanctions on Canada. He closes border crossings to commercial traffic. He attempts to freeze Canadian assets. This is economic catastrophe. This triggers immediate recession across both economies. It would devastate industries in both countries within weeks. It sounds insane, but with this administration's track record, insanity is always on the table. Path C, the realignment. Carney succeeds completely. Within 2 years, Canada has fundamentally reoriented its economy toward Europe and Asia. They've built alternative infrastructure. They've established new partnerships that don't include America. This doesn't just hurt the U.S. short term. It permanently diminishes American economic influence in the Western Hemisphere. It means the U.S. loses its guaranteed northern resource base forever. I think we're heading toward Path A, with elements of Path C accelerating faster than anyone expected. This is the moment where cooler heads usually prevail, but Trump doesn't do cool-headed, and Carney isn't interested in rescuing him. We're in unprecedented territory. The economic map you learned, the one where North America functions as one unit, is being redrawn. Carney just demonstrated that you can call a superpower's bluff if you have alternatives lined up. But calling that bluff has consequences, and we're all about to experience them. The question isn't whether this will hurt both economies. The question is who adapts faster. Do you think Carney is securing Canada's independence, or is he gambling with economic stability for political points? I want your honest assessment. Is this the end of North American integration, or is it the lesson in consequences Trump needed to learn? Leave a comment below. I read every single one. And if you want to understand what happens when these new trade routes actually go live, and they will within months, make sure you're subscribed. You need to see what comes next. The global economy is being rewired. Don't look away.